answer. It's Tiny Toon Adventures, where some special you've got cheer.
Imagine sitting down with a bowl of cereal on a Saturday morning, ready for bright colors, silly gags, and your favorite cartoon characters. Instead, within minutes, you're watching those same characters crack open a beer, get progressively more intoxicated, sing about drinking, steal a police car, and then recklessly drive straight off a cliff to their deaths. Yes, this actually happened in a show made for kids. A show marketed as safe, lighthearted fun. This wasn't a one-off late-night special or some hidden adult parody. This was right there, in the middle of a normal episode of Tiny Toon Adventures, a series known for wacky slapstick and harmless jokes, suddenly taking one of the darkest turns in Saturday morning TV history. And then, almost as quickly as it aired, it was gone. Pulled from reruns, cut from TV syndication packages, left out of many streaming releases. Today, we're breaking down the Tiny Toons episode that networks didn't want you to see, uncovering surprising and even shocking facts about the people behind it, and exploring the bizarre, almost banned moment that nearly put the entire series in the crosshairs. And by the end, you might never look at Tiny Toons the same way again.
Believe this. Another mediocre script. And what's worse, we're not even in this one.
Before we dive headfirst into this infamous episode, you have to understand what Tiny Toons Adventures was supposed to be. In the early 90s, this was the crown jewel of Warner Brothers animation, a modern revival of a classic Looney Tunes energy, but with a fresh, younger cast for a new generation. Every afternoon, kids came home to bright colors, fast jokes, and slapstick comedy so safe, your parents didn't have to think twice about letting you watch. There were wacky chase scenes, harmless pranks, and just enough pop culture humor to make you feel like you were in on the joke. Buster and Babs Bunny, no relation as they love to remind us, were the anchors of Acme Acres. Plucky Duck was the lovable schemer, always plotting his way into trouble. Hampton J. Pig was the kind, clean, slightly neurotic one who usually tried to keep everyone out of danger. And surrounding them was a cast of colorful, cartoony characters who, despite their quirks, always ended the day with a laugh. This was a comfort show. It was safety in animated form. Parents trusted it, kids adored it. And Warner Brothers marketed it as wholesome family entertainment that could never possibly go too far.
You were never on Tiny Toons. You never existed, and everything is different now. Get it?
Got it.
Which is why One Beer hit so hard. Because in the middle of this lighthearted universe, with no warning, came a segment so wildly out of place, so shockingly adult in its themes, that it completely shattered the illusion of what Tiny Toons was supposed to be. And here's the wild part. It wasn't buried in some edgy Halloween special or late-night rerun. It aired during regular programming hours, sandwiched between two silly, harmless shorts, in an episode called Elephant Issues. One moment you're laughing at cartoon antics, the next you're staring at the TV in disbelief, wondering if you really just saw Buster Bunny chugging a beer before getting behind the wheel of a stolen police car. That tonal whiplash is exactly what burned One Beer into the brains of everyone who caught it that day, and why it would go down in history as one of the most controversial 7 minutes of children's television ever produced. It all starts with something so small you could almost miss it. Hampton walks by a wall and spots a lone beer bottle just sitting there, like some random prop left behind after a party. There's no setup, no warning, just here's a beer. Plucky, being Plucky, instantly gets that gleam in his eye. He wants to try it because in his mind, drinking beer is what makes you cool.
What are you thinking, Buster? Let's drink it. Drink it? But Buster, this isn't like you. I know, but in this episode, we're showing the evils of alcohol.
Buster hesitates for all of half a second before agreeing. And Hampton, the voice of reason in almost every episode, doesn't just object, he joins in. That alone was a red flag for longtime fans. Hampton was the straight arrow, the neat freak, the guy who would rather stay home and clean his room than break a rule. Seeing him willingly crack open a beer alongside Plucky and Buster was the first clue this was not going to be a typical Tiny Toons adventure. From there, things spiral fast. They take one sip, and in seconds, they're drunk. And not cartoon silly drunk, actually drunk. Their speech slurs, their eyes glaze over, their noses turn red. And instead of treating it like a quick gag, the animators launch into a full-blown musical number celebrating how fun drinking is. Now, to an adult, it's obvious this is satire. The song is over the top, the dancing is ridiculous, and the behavior is intentionally exaggerated. But for a kid in the 90s, this was weirdly realistic. The characters stumble, they knock things over, they laugh for no reason. It didn't feel like a PSA. It felt like you were watching your favorite cartoon characters genuinely get hammered. And just when you think the bit will end, it takes another leap into forbidden territory. They spot a police car, decide to borrow it, and drive off. This isn't a quick cutaway. It's a full chase sequence of reckless driving, near crashes, and flashing sirens. You can almost hear the network lawyers sweating. Then comes the moment that sealed this short's fate, the cliff plunge. The car soars through the air in slow motion. The music cuts, and you realize they are absolutely not walking away from this one. For a split second, it looks like the show has just killed off its three main characters in the middle of a kids' comedy series. Fade to black, silence, and then, in one final twist, the trio pops up on a blank stage, grinning as they tell the audience not to drink because it's not cool.
I hope the kids got the message. Yeah, drinking's uncool.
The intent was clear. Make the dangers of drinking so ridiculous and extreme that kids would be scared away from trying it. But the execution? For many parents, it was a nightmare. This wasn't the kind of joke you forget after the credits rolled. It was the kind that stuck with you for years and made you wonder if the people behind Tiny Toons had completely lost their minds, or if they knew exactly what they were doing. And here's where it gets even more interesting, because the people behind those voices, the ones making you laugh one moment and shocking you the next, have their own stories. Stories that might just be more surprising than the episode itself. Part of why this episode hits so hard is because the voices behind these characters weren't just random casting choices. They were, and still are, some of the most iconic names in animation history. These actors brought decades of skill, personality, and instinct to their roles, which meant that even in a bizarre, over-the-top segment like One Beer, the performances felt weirdly real. And that's exactly what made it so unsettling. Charlie Adler was the fast-talking, quick-witted energy at the heart of Buster Bunny.
You are barking up the wrong bunny. And if I don't get my book report done for class, I'm gonna be a flunked bunny.
By the early 90s, Charlie had already proven he could morph into dozens of distinct personalities. From the wild antics of Ed in Cow and Chicken, to the bumbling IR Baboon, and dozens of other characters across 90s animation. But what most fans don't know is that Charlie's time on Tiny Toons wasn't without drama. He left the show partway through its run after a dispute with the show's creators, a move that surprised many in the industry at the time. That sharp comedic edge he gave Buster, the smirk in his voice, the timing of every sarcastic jab, is part of what made One Beer feel different from a standard PSA. When Buster was supposed to be drunk, Charlie didn't just play it goofy. He played it with this oddly confident swagger that made you believe the character really thought this was a good idea. The authentic delivery, especially in the moments before the chaos completely spirals, is what turns Buster's part in One Beer from just silly to something you can't quite shake. If Mel Blanc was the voice of the original Looney Tunes, Joe Alaskey was the man who carried that torch into a new era. Joe stepped into the shoes of some of Blanc's most beloved characters, Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, and more, and made them his own without losing that classic spark. Plucky Duck was Joe's playground.
I am no sidekick. Hampton's a sidekick type. He has all the earmarks of a sidekick.
He could flip from slick-talking charmer to unhinged chaos machine in half a second, which is exactly the dynamic One Beer demanded. In this short, Plucky goes from suggesting they drink to being the ringleader of the drunken escapade, and Joe sells every single beat. And here's a bit of fun trivia. Joe once performed an entire stand-up comedy set in character as Plucky at a fan convention, complete with improvised banter and audience interaction. That same quick thinking, I'll try anything once energy is all over Plucky in One Beer, making his performance feel less a cartoon and more like your troublemaking friend dragging you into something you're going to regret. Don Messick was one of the most prolific voice actors in history. The original voice of Scooby-Doo, Papa Smurf, and countless Hanna-Barbera characters, Don was a master at bringing warmth and sincerity to his roles. Hampton J. Pig was no exception. A sweet, careful, slightly neurotic character who often played the moral compass of the group, which is exactly why his behavior in One Beer is so shocking.
Do you mean like steal the car, risk going to jail? Sounds like fun. Cool, man.
Hearing Don's gentle, almost fatherly voice gleefully joining in on this ridiculous, reckless bender feels wrong on a fundamental level. It's like walking into a bank and finding Mr. Rogers behind the counter, halfway through robbing the place. It just doesn't compute. That clash between the voice we associate with safety and the actions we're seeing on screen is part of what makes Hampton's turn in One Beer so unforgettable. Babs Bunny doesn't appear in One Beer, but her absence is notable.
Guess who won free eats at the Pasha Sweet Shop in Acme Acres? Go on, guess!
In most episodes, Babs' fast-talking, chaotic humor, brought to life by Kath Soucie, balanced Buster's cooler, more collected vibe. Without her, the short feels even more off-kilter, like there's no anchor to stop the slide into madness. Kath Soucie herself has acknowledged that One Beer was a lot for its target audience. She said she thought the tone of the short was a little too much for kids, even with the PSA ending, and that leaving it out of reruns might have been the safest choice for the time. Coming from a performer who thrived on edgy humor, that says a lot about how far this episode pushed things. And here's the thing. When you put all of these voices together, you get a performance that's too good for what's supposed to be a silly anti-drinking sketch. The commitment, the timing, the delivery. It's what makes One Beer feel like a fully lived-in story instead of a throwaway gag. And that realism is part of why the backlash was so intense. But as wild as the episode was, it wasn't the only time Tiny Toons danced dangerously close to the edge. In fact, there's another moment, one that almost got the entire episode it belonged to banned, that's just as strange and maybe even more telling about how risky kids' cartoons could be in the early 90s. As shocking as One Beer was, the short wasn't released on its own. It was actually the middle segment of an episode called Elephant Issues, an anthology made up of 3 separate cartoons. The first segment, completely harmless slapstick. The third, a silly, forgettable gag. But the middle was One Beer. And here's the kicker. The network came this close to pulling the entire Elephant Issues episode off the air, just to avoid dealing with it. Why? Because in children's television, context matters. If One Beer had aired during some special, very important episode slot with heavy promotion and a parental warning, maybe it could have avoided the firestorm. But sandwiched between two innocent, goofy shorts, it felt like a sucker punch. Imagine being a parent in 1991, letting your kid watch Tiny Toons while you folded laundry in the other room. You hear the TV blaring a musical number, assume it's another silly song about homework or vegetables, and then you walk in to find cartoon animals slurring their speech, joyriding in a stolen police car, and diving off a cliff to their deaths. That's not a gentle, teachable moment. That's a nightmare fuel moment you're explaining to your 5-year-old for the rest of the day. And here's what makes it even stranger. Warner Brothers had reportedly already been nervous about the segment before it aired. There were discussions behind the scenes about whether to cut it entirely or tone it down. Animators who worked on the episode have hinted in interviews that there were multiple notes from standards and practices, but the team pushed back, arguing the satire wouldn't land unless they went all in on the absurdity. So the compromise was this: they would air elephant issues exactly once in its original form. No edits, no cuts, let the audience see it, take the heat, and then quietly remove One Beer from syndication packages moving forward. That's why so many kids only remember this short from one specific viewing. Because unless you caught that original broadcast or managed to get your hands on certain VHS releases, you were out of luck. In some regions, One Beer didn't just vanish from TV, it was replaced entirely with a different segment for reruns. And believe it or not, One Beer wasn't the only time Tiny Toons brushed up against a ban. Just a year later, another short involving cartoon gun safety, something that should have been harmless, nearly faced the same fate after execs feared the imagery was too intense for young viewers. But unlike One Beer, that one made it to air uncut, quietly dodging the bullet. Literally.
Oh, this is so weird. One beer and the whole world looks screwy.
This pattern, pushing the boundaries of what could be shown in a kid's cartoon, wasn't unique to Tiny Toons. It was part of a bigger trend in the 90s, where shows constantly flirted with taboo topics before retreating back into safe territory. And One Beer ended up becoming one of the most extreme examples of how far they were willing to push before crossing the invisible line. And if you think the story ends there, it doesn't. Because what happened after One Beer aired triggered something much bigger. A wave of heightened censorship across all children's programming, from Animaniacs to Batman the Animated Series, even stretching into shows you'd never expect. When One Beer finally hit the airwaves, the reaction was immediate. Some parents understood what the writers were trying to do. They saw it as classic Looney Tunes-style exaggeration with a moral at the end. But for others, there was nothing funny about it. To them, it looked like a 7-minute celebration of underage drinking, followed by a quick "don't do it" tacked on at the end. The backlash came quickly. Letters poured into Warner Brothers and local TV stations. Parent advocacy groups labeled it irresponsible and inappropriate for the intended audience. Television critics openly debated whether satire even worked on children. Executives, already on edge about their brand image, decided it wasn't worth the risk. One Beer was quietly removed from most rerun schedules, and in some regions, it was replaced entirely with a different segment. But the shockwaves didn't stop at Tiny Toons. Behind the scenes, executives across the animation industry began rethinking what could and couldn't pass network standards and practices. Suddenly, content that might have slipped through a year earlier was under a microscope. Scenes involving alcohol or drugs were rewritten or cut entirely. Moments where a character pointed a gun directly at the audience were redrawn from scratch. Even jokes that hinted at death or serious injury were softened or replaced with something less controversial. And this wasn't just a Warner Brothers decision. It became a shift across all of 90s children's television. Animators found their scripts being combed over for the smallest things that might trigger a complaint. Shows like Animaniacs began trimming their more suggestive humor.
Hey, it was a two-sided coin. I just forgot which side was two'd.
I always get what I want. It's a talent I have.
Batman, the animated series, had to rework entire action sequences to comply with new rules about how weapons could be depicted. In Japan, an episode of Pokémon that caused seizures when it aired never saw the light of day again, making networks worldwide more cautious about visual effects. Even Captain Planet, a series built on moral lessons and environmentalism, had episodes pulled from syndication for tackling issues like HIV and gang violence too directly. What One Beer proved was that it didn't take much to spark a full-blown media panic. A single 7-minute cartoon segment, aired just once, could leave such a deep mark on a show's reputation that it would be remembered decades later. Not for the hundreds of safe, harmless episodes, but for the one that went too far. And the irony? In trying to warn kids about the dangers of drinking, Tiny Toons had accidentally created one of the most memorable, most talked about, and most sought-after episodes in the show's history. Because in the 90s, when something was banned or censored, it didn't just disappear, it became a legend. Kids whispered about it on playgrounds, fans traded VHS tapes under the table, and the more networks tried to hide it, the more people wanted to see it.
Yeah, well, get a lawyer, Newsy. I'm not gonna pay.
Oh, yeah? Ha! My lawyer can beat up your lawyer. Now, it's personal.
Even now, One Beer sparks debates about whether controversial kids' TV should be preserved for history with a warning or locked away forever. And that question leads directly into another infamous cartoon moment, one that went even further, caused even more backlash, and somehow still made it to air. Looking back now, it's obvious One Beer wasn't promoting alcohol. It was mocking it. But in 1991, networks decided kids couldn't handle satire this dark. And maybe they were right. Or maybe this is exactly the kind of extreme, shocking lesson that actually sticks with you. So what do you think? Should networks preserve episodes like this with a warning, or keep them hidden? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to see another cartoon that went even further, check out my deep dive on the Captain Planet episode that was banned from TV right here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.